Hi, and welcome to Why Do Countries Exist, an episode on South African political parties. So today's episode was requested by Zethan Productions on YouTube. If you want me to make a video on something, just let me know via email or in the comments and I'll consider it. I know Rexus on YouTube has asked that I make a video on Dutch political parties, so that is planned for the future. Also, just so we are all clear, I'm a white guy from Washington State in America. I have no real ties to South Africa, I've never been, so my pronunciation of names from South Africa are, to put it bluntly, it's not going to be good. I'll try my best. I'll look at recordings of it to try to, copy that. But yeah, it's not going to be good. I'll try. I apologize if that bothers you. But let's just try to dive right into South African politics. Now, there are some important background details that I want to mention right up at the start. South Africa is generally considered to be divided into four main racial groups. There are black South Africans that make up a majority of the country. There are white South Africans that make up a small but significant minority. There's a small collection of Asian South Africans, who mainly come from India, and then there is finally what is known as the Cape Colored community. The term colored in South Africa does not have a negative connotation, unlike in the US, and the colored community is made up of mixed blacks and white people who have formed their own community. Within these four racial groups there are also further divisions. For example, the white South Africans are generally divided between the Afrikaners, who are originally from the Netherlands and moved into the countries in the 1700s, and British South Africans who have ties to Britain. You probably know that South Africa suffered under a system known as apartheid in the mid to late 20th century. Apartheid saw the white South Africans hold full control of the economic and political power in the country, and sought to disenfranchise the black majority. The fight against apartheid took the form of both peaceful disobedience and violent insurgency against the regime until its fall in 1994. I'm really only scratching the surface of what happened, but I mention all of this to say that while black South Africans are no longer legally held back, the society itself is still fairly divided, and racial, linguistic, regional, and economic divisions are still very much present in South Africa, and have to be recognized if you want to understand parties in the nation. South Africa is currently a parliamentary republic, with two national legislators making up the parliament. There is an upper house, the National Council, which we won't really talk about due to how weak it is, and then there is the National Assembly, which is where most of the political power lays. The National Assembly has 400 members present in it, where these members will elect the president of the country and help write laws and regulations. Members are elected via proportional representation, meaning that if Party A wins 20% of the vote, they will get roughly 20% of the seats in Parliament. 200 are elected based on the national vote, and another 200 are elected by the regional vote. Speaking of regions, South Africa is divided up into 9 regions. Now, South Africa is a unitary state, meaning the regional governments are fairly weak, but they do have their own regional council, and do play a part in shaping the political landscape in each region. They also will importantly help us map out where each party is located for this episode. So let's start off with the ruling party of the country, the African National Congress, or ANC. The ANC has run the country since the end of apartheid in 1994, winning every single election with at least 55% of the vote, if not more. The party is ideologically considered center-left and social democratic. The party is mainly backed by black South Africans, particularly among the Sa and Zulu-speaking blacks. There's also some limited support among Indian and colored South Africans. They also tend to do well in the eastern regions, such as the Eastern Cape, KwaZulu-Natal, and Mpumalanga. The ANC has 230 seats in the National Assembly and is a leading party in every single region of the country, with the exception of the Western Cape, where it is the main opposition party. The party is headed by Cyril Ramaphosa, who has been the president of the country since 2018. Also, the party is a part of the tripartite alliance with the South African Communist Party and the Congress of South African Trade Unions. This alliance is led by the ANC, with the two other groups influencing the ANC and helping mobilize voters to back the ANC come election time. The party's policies are also considered interventionist. It still supports a capitalist system in the country, but also backs strong government intervention in most industries and opposes the free market. The party also argues for the concept of the Rainbow Nation. The Rainbow Nation refers to the idea that South Africa is for everyone, black, colored, white, Asian, or whoever else. It is recognized that there are differences and inequality between these groups, but seeks to promote a society where all groups can live together. This Rainbow Nation concept also means supporting underprivileged groups like the black majority by making it easier for the mostly black population to get access to healthcare, jobs, education, and housing. However, one important thing to note about the ANC is the ANC can often fall into an almost non-ideological state. Because the ANC has been so dominant in South African politics, they in many ways don't need to seriously articulate their policies to the voter because they can just rely on the status as a party that ended apartheid to win them most elections. The party is also fairly divided. It has members that argue for South Africa to move towards a more neoliberal state with free trade agreements, and also members who argue for a more socialist-like state that has a greater focus on promoting the interests of black South Africans. Finally, I do think it's important to note that the ANC is widely considered to be fairly corrupt, especially under the previous president of the country, Jacob Zuma. It is said that by the end of Jacob Zuma's reign, over $1 trillion was lost due to corruption or mismanagement. Today, the ANC under Ramaphosa is trying to clean up its image, but Ramaphosa himself has been accused of corruption and shady business dealings, so it looks unlikely for now that the ANC will fully remove all corruption in the party. But let's move on to our next party, the Democratic Alliance, or the DA. The DA has served as the country's main opposition party, with it arguing for liberalism in South Africa, with both right and left-wing elements of the party. The party is in many ways fairly multiracial, with the party seeing large support from mainly the white and colored community, but also having a decent number of blacks and Indians present in the party. The party also sees a large amount of support from those with higher education, those living in urban and suburban areas, the elderly, and rich South Africans. The party has 84 seats in the National Assembly, and is the ruling party in the Western Cape. It is the main opposition party in Gauteng, Eastern Cape, the Northern Cape, and the Free State, while also remaining present in the remaining 4 regional legislatures. The party is currently headed by John Steenhuisen, the leader of the opposition and a member of the National Assembly. The DA promotes the idea of non-racialism, or a South Africa in which race is not seen as important, in which they hope would be a post-racial world. This means it is opposed to racism and xenophobia, but also affirmative action and land reform. The party supports an economy based on economic growth, often arguing for privatization, less regulations, and opposing a minimum wage. The party believes that by relying more on the private sector, it can help address economic woes. The party also wants to do more to fight against corruption, move towards a more constituency-based electoral system, wants to increase the size of the police force and its budget, and wants to improve education to lift people out of poverty. Now, much like the ANC, the DA is not a controversy-free party. The DA is often accused by its opponents of being a party for rich whites. For example, in the 21 years the DA has existed, the party has had only one black leader. Speaking of former leaders, the longtime former leader of the party, Helen Zille, did say that there are more racist laws in South Africa today than there were under apartheid. Infighting and corruption is also present in the party, as you will soon find out with a later party. The next party takes us in the opposite direction of the DA, with the Economic Freedom Fighters Party, or EFF. The EFF supports a radical Marxist look at South Africa and black nationalism. This black nationalist party, unsurprisingly, receives most of its support from blacks in the country, especially ethnic Spendi, Songa, and Venda, who it receives a large amount of its support from. Its support base is also mostly male, young, poor, and from the northern regions. The party has 44 members in the National Assembly, is the main opposition party in Limpopo, Mpumalanga, and the Northwest, and is present in the remaining regional legislatures. The party is headed by Julius Malema, the former head of the ANC Youth Wing and current member of the National Assembly. The party's Marxist ideology heavily influences many of its policies. It strongly opposes capitalism in the country, arguing for the nationalization of the economy, an increase in welfare and other aid to the poor, and radical land distribution. The party is strongly Africanist in its outlook, arguing that South Africa's economic prosperity should be given to the benefit of the poor blacks present in the country, and not just benefiting a rich few, which they often point out tends to be either white, Indian, or from outside the country. The party also backs progressive social ideas on gender and sexuality, opposes regionalism and federalism, wants a crackdown on corruption, is supportive of the death penalty, and supports anti-imperialist and left-wing forces across the world. Now, the party is often accused of being very militant, something that can be shown in the fact that the party has a war council, although this council doesn't really focus on violence. The party is often accused of holding anti-white sentiments. For example, Malema famously sung a song called Shoot the Boer, Boer being another word for the white Afrikaner ethnic group. Malema has also stated that he is, quote, not calling for the slaughter of white people, at least for now, which doesn't necessarily inspire a lot of confidence. Besides this, the party also has been accused of anti-Indian sentiment, sexism, and a cult of personality around Malema. Also, before we go to the next party, I do want to say that despite the anti-white sentiment that allegedly exists, there are actually white members of the EFF. While they certainly are a small branch of the party, they do exist. Next we go to the Inkatha Freedom Party. Inkatha is seen as being a more right-wing party, with it holding conservative, tribalistic, and Ubuntu values. The party is mainly backed by ethnic Zulus in the country, especially those in more rural areas, and those close to traditional Zulu chiefs. It also does see some support from Indians in KwaZulu-Natal. The party has 14 seats in the National Assembly and is the main opposition party in KwaZulu-Natal and is present in the Gauteng legislature. The party is currently headed by Velsinkohlini Halblisa, a member and head of the opposition in the KwaZulu-Natal legislature. The party is in favor of moving political power away from the central government and back into local traditional chiefs and sources of authority. They propose giving greater power to local governments and moving towards a more federal government. It also backs privatization in the economy, wants to crack down on illegal immigration, wants to reduce the power of unions, wants to increase trade and military relations with other African states, and wants to do more to crack down on crime, particularly domestic abuse against women. Now, the party has a bit of a controversial history. During the final years of apartheid, Inkatha was involved with clashes with ANC supporters and the Zulu traditional king, and at several points committed outright massacres against ANC members. Inkatha was seen by anti-apartheid activists as upholding and defending the apartheid racial order, by fighting the ANC and working with right-wing Afrikaner groups. While the party certainly has changed since the 90s, and no longer engages in political violence, this period of the party's history has left a stain on the party. Speaking of right-wing Afrikaner groups, we go to the Freedom Front Plus, or FF Plus, or in Afrikaners, Vryheid Front Plus. FF Plus represents right-wing Afrikaner conservatives and nationalists. The party gets most of its support from white Afrikaners, although a small number of colored voters also back the party. Many of the party supporters tend to live in rural areas in the north of the country. The party has 10 seats in the National Assembly and is present in every regional legislature, with the exception of KwaZulu-Natal. The party is headed by Peter Groenewald, a member of the National Assembly. The party is centered around making sure Afrikaners are represented and believes strongly in the self-determination of the community. The party opposes land reform in the country and regularly tries to bring political focus to farm attacks against white South Africans. It wants the Afrikaner language to be promoted and opposes any policies it sees as damaging the language or community. The party also opposes affirmative action, wants to crack down on corruption, illegal immigration, and crime, backs economic liberalism, supports a two-state solution in Israel, and promotes Christian ideals. FF Plus also supports the creation of the Volksstaat, or a homeland for white Afrikaners. This can sometimes mean that this new homeland becomes a new province within South Africa, or it is an area with extra autonomy, or even among some more radical supporters, outright secession from the rest of South Africa. The FF Plus is often criticized for holding on to old ideas about race in South Africa, with many saying the party promotes racial division in the country and is very exclusive. Many opponents of the party tend to point out that the party was formed with the help of the Conservative Party, a party that emerged in the last years of apartheid, arguing against ending the racial status quo. Next we go to the African Christian Democratic Party, or ACDP. ACDP is a Christian democratic and socially conservative party, appealing to Protestant Christian fundamentalists. It seems to get equal support from both black and white South Africans. It has 4 seats in the National Assembly, and is present in the Gauteng, KwaZulu-Natal, and Western Cape legislatures. The party is headed by Kenneth Michaud, an evangelist preacher and member of the National Assembly. The party supports traditional ideas around the family, and focuses its policies on keeping the traditional family unit together. It is pro-life, opposes comprehensive sex ed for talking about more than just abstinence, and Michaud himself has several times made remarks that have been deemed offensive towards the LGBTQ community, such as, quote, "I'm not attracted to other men, I know it's not healthy." The party is also pro-Israeli, supports free market economics, supports cracking down on crime, and wants to do more to protect the environment. Next we go to the United Democratic Movement, or UDM. UDM is a center-left party formed from former ANC members after the party's leader, Bantu Holomisa, the former leader of the apartheid puppet state of Transkei, was removed from the party. The party has 2 seats in the National Assembly and has 2 seats in the Eastern Cape Regional Legislature. Also, I'll just say it now, the UDM and the remaining parties I will talk about get very limited support. Like, the UDM and all the remaining parties received less than 0.5% of the vote in the national election in 2019. The UDM supports the Rainbow Nation concept similar to the ANC, believing in a multiracial South Africa. It wants to end corruption and build up the country's infrastructure, backs land reform, believes traditional tribal leaders are needed in South Africa, supports greater environmental regulations, wants to invest more in education, and wants to do more to ensure women's rights, disability rights, and people with albinism are treated with respect. Now we go to the African Transformation Movement, or ATM. The party is ideologically Christian democratic, with the party mainly backed by members of several independent African churches in the Eastern Cape. The party has 2 seats in the National Assembly and is present in both the Eastern Cape and KwaZulu-Natal regional legislatures. The party is headed by Zenulu Zenuga, a member of the National Assembly, and apparently also a student at the University of South Africa. The party encourages Christian values in society, although it is not outwardly hostile towards non-Christians. The party supports the death penalty and wants to end low pass marks in schools and corruption in the country. It also proposes reforming the South African Constitution and giving greater political power towards black South Africans and away from rich elites and the white minority. It opposes the amount of influence foreign companies have in the country and believes that this economic power needs to be moved towards the average South African. Next we go to the Good Party. Good was formed from former members of the DA in the Western Cape, who backed the current leader of Good, Patricia de Lille. De Lille accused the DA of racism, while the DA in turn accused de Lille, who was at the time the mayor of Cape Town, of corruption. Good was formed by de Lille's supporters, ideologically tending to range from social liberals to social democrats. The party is mainly backed by the colored community in the Western Cape, with limited support among the white and black community. The party has 2 seats in the National Assembly and 1 seat in the Western Cape Regional Legislature. De Lille is also a member of the National Assembly and is the current Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure. Good is an anti-racist party, believing in the Rainbow Nation concept. The party supports land reform and wants to do more to fight structural racism in South African society. The party is like many parties opposed to corruption, but often targets corruption in the DA rather than targeting the ANC, like most other parties do. Good also believes in making housing, electricity, and healthcare cheaper, wants to introduce domestic violence prevention courses in school, and backs greater environmental regulations. We will now go to the National Freedom Party, or NFP. The NFP was formed from ex-Inkatha members that back current party leader, Zanele Khomaza Masibi. She left the party after Inkatha suffered losses in the 2009 election, arguing for a more center-left approach to politics. The party gets most of its support from Zulus in KwaZulu-Natal, similar to Inkatha. It has 2 seats in the National Assembly and 1 in the KwaZulu-Natal Regional Legislature. Masibi was also formerly a member of the National Assembly and was the Deputy Minister of Science and Technology until 2019 after elections that year where the party suffered heavy losses. Finding about policies in the party was fairly difficult. It seems like the latest news around the party mainly centers on its decline in the 2019 election. When I tried to go to their website, it was down, and their Facebook hasn't posted anything since the 2019 election, so if I had to guess, they probably aren't really active anymore, and its remaining members are probably just using the name to keep themselves in parliament or in local government. Wikipedia says it's center-left, so there's that. The next party, I also sadly struggled to find their website or a whole lot of info on them. We have the African Independent Congress, or AIC. The party was formed from a breakoff of the ANC, mainly from members in the Eastern Cape in the region of Matamela, which the AIC feels belongs in KwaZulu-Natal. It has 2 seats in the National Assembly. The party's leader is Mandela Gallo, a member of the National Assembly. The party is anti-corruption, and argues to dissolve the regions of the country so local governments can have a greater say in day-to-day activities. It supports giving greater funds to schools, and especially underprivileged schools. It also apparently holds socially conservative values, but I couldn't find anyone except Wikipedia saying that. Also, apparently the party had some limited success in the 2014 election, due to the fact that its name and party colors were so similar to that of the ANC that some voters got confused and accidentally voted for the AIC, so that's just a fun, colorful tidbit. Next we go to the Congress of the People Party, or COPE. The party was yet another breakoff of the ANC, this time from members opposed to Jacob Zuma coming to power in 2007. The party represents the right wing of the ANC, promoting more moderate social democratic and socially liberal policies. The party's support base are often ex-ANC members and white progressives, particularly from the Free States and the Northern Cape. The party has 2 seats in the National Assembly. The party is headed by Masulu Lekota, former Minister of Defense. He also apparently has the nickname Terror due to his aggressive style of soccer playing. COPE holds many similar values to the ANC, such as the belief in the Rainbow Nation concept and believing in a regulated but free market. However, the party also believes that society should start to move towards a more non-racial system, similar to what the DA proposes, and opposes land reform. The party is also strongly opposed to Marxism, and wants to make it so mayors and other local government officials are elected directly, as opposed to by the local legislature. We finally now go to a party that wasn't formed as a breakoff. The Pan-African Congress of Anzia, or PAC, is a black nationalist and African socialist party, formed as a more radical branch of the anti-apartheid movement. I guess the party could be considered the EFF before the EFF. The party itself has been plagued with infighting between different factions, and some of its more controversial actions during apartheid has left the party more on the fringe of South African politics. PAC has one seat in the National Assembly, which is held by party leader Mzila Nyotso. The party seeks to end the remaining colonial legacy of apartheid and make South Africa a country run exclusively by black South Africans. The party wants to crush the rich capitalist and middle class in the country, although the party actually rejects strict Marxist orthodoxy, believing a racial conflict lens is more accurate in South Africa than a class conflict lens. The party also hopes to promote black nationalism and Pan-Africanist ideals all across the African continent, to remove all traces of neo-colonialism. Finally, the last party we have is actually a little bit surprising. At least it was for me. Al-Jama-ah, or translated from Arabic, the congregation, is a Muslim democratic party, seeking to represent the interests of Muslims in the country, with a lot of support centered in Cape Town. The party has one seat in the National Assembly, and one seat in the Western Cape Regional Legislature. The party is headed by Hanif Hendricks, a member of the National Assembly, and former member of the Cape Town Municipality Legislature. The party should not be mistaken for holding an Islamist ideology. It doesn't seek to impose Islam on South Africa, but rather wants to try and make life easier for Muslim South Africans, such as trying to pass a law that would allow for Muslims in the country to marry under Sharia law, and the state providing legal and religious assistance if they so choose. It also wants to crack down on both domestic abuse and corruption present in the country, reduce pollution in the inner cities, and try and create more jobs relating to small businesses. So those are the parties of South Africa. As kind of a brief little summary, there are essentially 4 layers of parties in the country. The first layer is the ANC, which controls a vast majority of the power in the country, and is able to dictate the course of the country by mobilizing a mass number of voters. In the second layer, there is the DA and EFF. These parties are the main opposition parties in the country, and seek to provide strong alternatives to the status quo and appeal to wide segments of the population. These parties, while not running the country yet, could very easily if the conditions were right. The next layer are parties like Inkatha, FF+, and maybe the ACDP. They appeal to a small but significant segment of the population. They aren't able to seriously challenge the ANC, but can prove to be powerful or influential on the local or even possibly regional level. Finally, there are the remaining parties. These parties are often small breakoffs of the larger parties and appeal to a very small substrata of the South African population. They really aren't able to challenge the ANC or even other opposition parties, but they do have potential for some growth. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode on South African political parties. This was, as I mentioned at the start, requested by Zethan Productions on YouTube. So if you want me to make an episode on whatever, just let me know in the comments or by an email or telepathic message, whatever, and maybe I'll consider it. After this, I think I'm going to work on the last couple British overseas territories, so Gibraltar, the bases on Cyprus, Pitcairn Islands, the British Indian Ocean Territory. Get that done, and then I'll do a video on Belize, and then I'll do Rex's request on YouTube and talk about the political parties of the Netherlands. But before I even get to the British overseas territories, I have a kind of special announcement. You'll see once I upload that. It's exciting. I hope you all like it. And if you don't, well, I guess, again, you can let me know in the comments or by email or by telepathic message, and I'll get the message that way. But yeah, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you want, you can email me at whydocountries.exist@gmail.com for your thoughts, comments, suggestions, or hate mail. Take care. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.